Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 5th of October. Today we have some updates, so let's start. First we're going to start with the north, with Kharkiv area, with north of LPR, from this area. We can say that the front line has been stabilized, of course, if we can say that, because the Russians expect the Ukrainian counteroffensive in this area, or to be more precise, the continuance of the previous attacks. And if we take a look at the Russian sources map, they gave us a few icons in this area. Now let's discuss them. During the day, the Russians Ministry of Defense reported about some losses about their activity during the previous 24 hours, and the Russians are saying that they attack near a small town, this one town, Shipivata, this one, 92nd Mechanized Brigade, and the Russians are saying that as a result of that attack, 100 soldiers of that brigade and 13 armored vehicles were destroyed. As you can see, this is the Ukrainian reserves for upcoming counteroffensive operation from Kupiansk direction. Furthermore, the Russians reported about some officer who was killed in this area, and also the Russians reported that they attacked the headquarters of Ukrainians that located in a town by the name of Kupiansk, in this town. So as you can see, the Russians are trying to pin down, to reduce the Ukrainians as much as possible on these directions, because they understand that Ukrainians will try to attack small town Svatova. This one, we can say that this is the west fortress, or west fortress of LPR, and if the Ukrainians are able to take this town, then the Ukrainians will be able to achieve, we can say, like operational square, like operational area to develop their offensive operation in many directions, like to the north, to the Russian border, in direction of Stabilization. By the way, Stabilization is the capital of Lugansk region that was a part of Ukraine starting from 2014. So we can say this is a very important town, and if Ukrainians are able to liberate this town, we can say that Ukrainians have liberated or returned control over the Lugansk region. So that's why, of course, they will try to develop their offensive operation in this direction. Also, the Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours, they attack 14th Mechanized Brigade. As you can see, the Ukrainians are trying to develop. There is a small back. We can see the direction of the Ukrainians. They tried to go around Svatova, and the Russians attacked this 14th Mechanized Brigade, and the Ukrainians lost around 55 soldiers and 12 armored vehicles. Also, as you can see on this map, there is few drones were destroyed in this area. As you can see, the Ukrainians are trying to understand and do some recon in combat. The one drone was destroyed right on the north of Svatova in this area. That means that Ukrainians are trying to understand about the reserve, about the fortification, the Russian position, and the main area of the attack. And another one was destroyed in the north. And if we are talking about this area, also, as we discussed, the Ukrainians may turn a little bit to the north in direction of Troitskaya, to this town, because if we take a look at the western sources map, we see that Troitskaya is the last one town that connects the Russia and LPR using the railroad. So if the Ukrainians are able to take Troitskaya, the supply logistic of this area will be reduced. So the Ukrainians are trying and want to attack from Kupiansk in direction of Nizhny Duvanka for many reasons, and the most important reason is that there is no rivers in this area between Troitska and Nizhny Duvanka, because if the Ukrainians attacks a little bit to the south between these two rivers, it will be not a very suitable position to attack Svatova, because in this case the Ukrainians will find themselves in some kind of artillery back. So that's why on this direction they need to go a little bit to the north, trying to encircle from this area. So that's why, as we just discussed on this map, they're making some recon combat, trying to understand what's going on. But there are a lot of risk to attack in direction of Troitskaya, because, as we discussed, if you remember, the Russians accumulated a very powerful fist in Belgorod region with their army, and they're not like in a hurry to move these forces on the territory of Ukraine. So that's why the Ukrainians understand that the closer to the border they're going to develop their attack, the higher risk that the Russians will start some counter-offensive operation, because I believe that the Russians are not planning to give up and to retreat from Troitska. So the north region is very difficult, very interesting. And to tell the truth, I'm not sure how the Ukrainians are planning to develop their operation in this area. Okay, now let's move to the south, to the Liman bridgehead, to this area. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours in Liman bridgehead in this area, they attacked around 93 mechanized brigade, and as a result of that attack, the Ukrainians lost around 90 soldiers and 7 armored vehicles. Furthermore, the Ukrainians are doing the same situation in the south, trying to send some commandos and scouts, trying to understand the best solution, the best position to do, the weakest point, and the Russians spotted two groups of commandos, and they destroyed these commandos. So as you can see, the same picture on this front line as well. The Ukrainians are moving closer and more closer to this river. Let's one more time. This Krasna Reka. So this Krasna Reka, or like if you translate Red River, this one is the defense barrier that the Russians are using against the Ukrainians. So they're moving, and as you can see, it's not very easy for the Ukrainians to attack this river, because the bridgehead that they might use is located in not very wide tunnel. As you can see, the distance between two rivers is just 10 kilometers. So I'm not sure about the benefits that the Russians can use from this situation, but anyway, I believe that they will, and they have some benefits from this situation. Furthermore, if you see, there is like a tunnel between these two rivers, and to attack Svatova, the Ukrainians need to move between these two rivers, and they won't have a lot of places for maneuvers. They won't be able, let's say, to move to the left, then again to the north, to the right, because there are bridges, there are just few places where they can cross the river. So that's why they need to move between these two rivers and to be mobile, flexible under Russian artillery pressure. So the Russians decided not to leave Svatova. The Russian sources are saying that there was a local order for civilians in Svata to evacuate this town. And today we got a report that something around 70% of people from this area left. So that means that the Russians are ready to ruin this town, to be ruined in this town by the Ukrainians attack. And I believe that something tells me that they are not planning to give up and to retreat from this position. There are also two other towns in this area, like Krasnorechskaya, this one, and Kremenная. But I'll repeat myself. If we are talking about the Ukrainians, to attack between these two rivers is not a very good idea. Because anyway, it's not very nice position and not very easy to do this. But we'll see what the Ukrainians are able to do, because anyway, they will continue their offensive operation. While they are planning to continue, today I also got very interesting number that the number of Ukrainian forces all along the front line, starting from north of LPR and ending in Kherson, is around 300,000 soldiers. The forces that located on the front line. Also, if we are talking about the north, about the Kharkiv area, around 70,000 soldiers were involved in the counteroffensive operation that took place in this area. And if we are talking about Kherson district, just 40,000. No, we can understand why, because the front line in Kharkiv is very wide, very big. If you remember, the Ukrainians started near start assault of all this town, Izum. So of course they need more forces in this area in comparison with this area, because as you can see, the Kherson front line is less than let's say LPR front line. So that's why the Ukrainian uses around 70,000 soldiers to do this counteroffensive operation, and they will continue because it will take time to regroup. If they decide, let's say, change the front line, it will take time, a lot of time, to move their forces, let's say, from Kharkiv district to Zaporozhye. So that's why. And the Ukrainians don't have this time, because the winter is coming, and we understand that by when the winter comes, it will be much more easier for the Russians to defend than the Ukrainians to attack. So because it's winter, it's always like that. Now let's talk about Seversk and, let's say, Lysychansk front line, because the Russians now, when they are talking about this area, they are calling these areas a separate front line, Lysychansk front line. And the Russians reported that on the line between Yakovlevka, Bilogorovka, Veselaya. In this triangle, it's our famous Charlie group. The Russians attacked this area, and as a result of their attack, the Ukrainian 54th, 18th, and 10th Brigade lost around 70 soldiers and 10 armored vehicles. If we're talking about this front, the Ukrainians are not attacking. They're trying to hold their position, trying to protect Severs, trying to protect flanks, because we understand that if the Ukrainians lose Severs by something like flank attack, the entire group in Liman will find itself in a very big danger. If we're talking about the Russians, they're moving slowly, step by step, in direction of Kurdyumovka, without any changes, in direction of Bakhmut and in direction of Solidar. But as you can see, there are no changes, and I believe that I'm not sure that we will see some changes during the upcoming weeks or something like this. Now let's move further, and now we are going to discuss Zaporozhye area. There are no changes on Donetsk front line, just the regular artillery duels and so on. If we are talking about Zaporozhye, there are the same picture, artillery duels and so on. The only update that the Russians attacked Zaporozhye during the previous 24 hours, and the 102nd Defense Brigade lost around 30 soldiers and 7 armored vehicles in this area, and there are no more changes on this front line. And now we are moving to Kherson. As you can see, there is an active phase of counteroffensive operation. Right before I start recording this video, I got report that Ukrainians started another attempt of their counteroffensive operation from 3 directions. The first one, as we discussed in my previous videos, in direction of Snegirovka, trying to attack the Russians in their back and their flank. Another attack in direction of Dutchany, this direction. And of course, the third one is attack in direction from Davidbroda, Avdiivka, bridgehead. So this the Ukrainians' 3 attacks. The Russians are saying that situation is not critical, but situation is difficult. You know that the Russians have few stages of every single situation. There are situation like normal situation, difficult situation, very difficult situation, and critical situation. So as you can see, the Russian reported that situation is difficult, not very difficult, and not critical. So I believe that maybe the Russians will be forced to retreat, to leave some towns, but during the day we haven't received any report that the Russians left from this defense line. So I believe that they have prepared for this counteroffensive operation, and as we discussed a few minutes ago, just 40,000 Ukrainians are involved in this operation. The Russians report that during the previous 24 hours, they attacked the Ukrainians in the town like Davidbrody, this one, the famous Davidbrody. The Russians attacked the Ukrainians in the town by the name of Dutchany. Also, the Russians attacked the Ukrainians in the town by the name of Novokamyanka in this area. And the losses of Ukrainians on this front line during the previous hours were around 230 soldiers and something around 42 armored vehicles. So let's see what the upcoming night is going to bring us. Anyway, today we got a lot of interesting updates from the West countries. Some intelligence sources reported that the Western partners, Ukrainian partners, are pushing Ukrainians to start the final grand battle in Zaporozhye, in this area. So, like, to start the third direction, because they understand that that this is like the last weeks when the Ukrainians are able to achieve any success, because then the Ukrainians will be forced to defend, because in a month the Russians are going to bring around 300,000 soldiers on the Ukrainian front line, and then the Russians will start the counteroffensive operation, and on this period the Ukrainians will be in the defense state. So that's why the Ukrainians need to get more territories, let's say to at least to establish control, like something like this on this front line, let's say to encircle Kherson as much as possible. If we're talking about LPR, let's say to establish control about on the territory that located on the top of this line. So this is their plan, And when the Russians move their reserves to this area, first they will have to return control over these territories. And of course, we understand that as soon as the Russians return these territories, then they will have to fight on the Ukrainian territories. And the question is if the Russians will have possibilities to do this while crossing these territories. So that's why it's very important for the Ukrainians to take as much as possible, because sooner or later they will have to step back and to defend and to lose the territories again. It's the same. It's the war situation. First you take, then you defend, and you're stepping back. So we'll see, and let's follow the situation. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you that we condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.